Hello everyone and welcome back. So today I'm going to just do a couple of small things on the tutorial mod. I know it's been ages since the last video, and I wanted to say thank you again for all the support. I've never seen so much activity on my YouTube channel before. It's kind of amazing. So let's go ahead and try to continue this. I'm going to pretty up a few things with the data generators, make sure we're up to date here with our versions. And next time we're going to start working on a tile entity of some type. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with it, but that will likely be in multiple videos because there is just so much to adding a tile entity. Well, not just a tile entity, but everything that you need for it to actually be used, like say a furnace. There's not just a block in the tile entity, there's also something called a container and a screen. It's a lot of parts, so it'll take a while to put them all together. So let's just take a look at something simple for now. I'm going to go ahead and update my mappings. So that is the latest version right now, and go ahead and update to the latest Forge version, which is down here. I believe I've done almost nothing with this build.gradle file, so still got tons of comments that just come with the normal MDK file or used to. I know the MDK's build.gradle has changed recently, but yeah, let's go ahead and just refresh this. So another way you can do that is go up here in the Gradle sidebar and click Reload. Okay, well that's going. I'll go ahead and check the mods.toml. This will be a problem. Let's go ahead and change that to this. Most mods that run on 1.16.3 will run on 4 and 5 as well. So if you need to, you can restrict that to a more specific version range, but actually I think we need to add a 1.17 in there so it won't load on any 1.17 versions whenever that comes out. Okay, so one thing I missed was loot tables, and another was recipes. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the loot tables first. So I'm going to call this mod loot table provider. We're going to extend the loot table provider class from net.minecraft.data. And that's not even going to complain about anything. Oh, well, because we're still updating Gradle there. So I'll go ahead and just type out some of this by hand while it's working itself out there. So we need a constructor that takes a data generator. Just pass that to super. Okay, and there are two methods we need to override here. This first one's kind of scary looking. And we'll get to that in just a moment. And the second method, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the whole thing here. Okay, so finally done updating a project, so we can go ahead and fix the imports and everything. Okay, so this getTables method is where we're going to be returning basically a set of classes that will provide the loot tables. We'll get to that in just a second. The validate method here is we need to override this because it's going to be looking for vanilla loot tables here, which is a problem. So we could still have this validate loot table here. But I believe the issue with this is that it's checking for vanilla loot tables to be generated, and we are not vanilla, so we don't need that. Okay, now there's a couple of ways you could do this. You could have an entire package full of different classes. If you're making a smaller mod, it might be better to just do this all in one class, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. We'll call this mod block loot tables. And we're going to extend block loot tables. And here we want to override a method called add tables. So if you look at this class, this is another vanilla class, and this has a bunch of helper methods for generating different types of loot tables. And I think, yeah, if we go down far enough here, we can see all the code where the blocks are registering loot tables. You can see most of them are just register drop self, which, as you might be able to guess from the name, it means that the block drops itself when you mine it. Obviously, there are blocks that don't do that. So, for example, there are some that need particular behavior for silk touch. Flower pots do their own thing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so back to add tables. We're going to get rid of that call to super because we don't need that. So let's see, what blocks do we have? So we've got the silver block and the silver ore, which are both just drop self in this case. So go ahead and do that. Same thing for the ore. That's pretty much all there is to it. So say you had an ore that you want to be affected by fortune. The way you would do that is register loot table. Then we got to give it whatever our block is. I'll just leave that out because we don't have a block like that. And then we can call dropping item with fortune, and that gives, then you pass in, I believe that's the same block. Yes, the same block, and then the item that it normally drops. So say if we were doing this for, I don't know, diamond ore, then this would also be the diamond ore, and the item would be items.diamond. So if you want ores that are have similar behavior to how diamond ores drop their loot, that's how to do it. So again, just think of what in vanilla does what you want, and look at that original method. Say, what if you want something that drops like redstone ore? Well, we can come down here and here's the redstone ore. So you can just copy this, modify it. It's a bit long. Unfortunately, the decompiled code is not always super readable. So you may have to copy this and then break it across multiple lines to be able to really understand it. Okay, so let's go back to this get tables method here. And we're just going to return an immutable list. It can be any kind of list, really. We're going to use the of method. And then we're going to give it pair.of mod block loot tables new. And the loot parameter set will be the one for blocks. The loot parameter sets.block. And that's pretty much all there is to it. And if you've got more loot table providers, then you just provide a new pair and just as many as you need. And I'll go ahead and show the method in Silent Gear here. So in this case, I've actually got them in separate packages. I've got blocks. I've got chest loot, which is loot that's being added to chest in the case of this mod. Entity loot tables. What entities do I have? Oh yes, that's just adding a drop to spiders. And then the gift loot tables, those are things like, say you have an item that gives you some items. You could potentially use that. And I just realized I forgot to change my display settings, so I hope all the text here is readable enough. No, I don't actually know how to increase the text size. Control Plus is not doing it. Okay, well, I'll remember to change it for the next video. Okay, and let's do a mod recipe provider. And we're going to extend this recipe provider class. And I better go ahead and add these to the data generators class before I forget them. So for the recipes, we've got a method called register recipes, which takes this consumer parameter that we're going to need to give to every recipe builder. And what do we have to work with? Okay, we just got silver ingots in this pack, so we can go ahead and do like a basic silver ingots to blocks and back, and then smelting the ore. So let's start with the ingots to blocks. Now in this case, you could really use either shaped or shapeless recipes. But the file that I'm referencing uses shaped for the blocks, which is definitely going to be, or might be a little bit less painful to type out. So let's go ahead and do that, just so we've got an example of both. So let's do a shapeless recipe first. So we use the Shapeless Recipe Builder class, and then we call this Shapeless Recipe. That's a static factory method that will create a new instance of the builder for us. And we are doing blocks to ingots for this one. So this is going to be mod items.silveringot.get, and we're going to be making 9 of them. Now we need to add the ingredients for this recipe. In this case, there's only one. And we'll just use our block. Could use a tag for silver blocks as well, but in this case, probably better to just use the block. Now, unfortunately, these vanilla recipe builders will throw an exception if you don't have an advancement criterion. So let's go ahead and just add a criterion. This will generate a recipe advancement file as well, but that's fine. And typically what you do is you have an has item criterion, and they've actually got a helper method for that called has item. And we'll just go ahead and say, let's say that the silver ingots unlock both recipes. Okay, and finally, that's all we need, so we need to call this build method and pass it to consumer. Now let's take a look at a shaped recipe. So we've got a shaped recipe builder that again has a static factory method. We're going to be making the silver block this time, just one, so we don't need to specify the count. Now, we're only going to have one type of ingredient, so let's go ahead and key that, and it's pretty common to use the hash sign or number symbol, whatever you want to call it, for this. You can use literally any character that you want. And this is going to be silver ingots. And again, you could use a tag in this case. But for blocks, it might be better to just use the item itself. I'm not entirely sure. You could argue that either way, but we're not here for that. Okay, so the pattern lines, this is going to lay out the pattern of the recipe, so we can have up to 3 of these, and each can have up to 3 characters, which is exactly what we're going to have in this case. It's just every slot of the crafting grid is filled with whatever the hash sign represents, which is in this case a silver ingot. And of course, if you have more than one type of ingredient here, like say we have one with the letter A, then you could just call the key method again for that. Put whatever you need in there. And once again, we'll need the advancement criterion. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this line. It's the exact same thing. and then we're going to build it. Okay, so now let's take a look at smelting recipes. So we've got cooking recipe builder, and this has a couple different factory methods, static factory methods here. So smelting recipes are for the regular furnace, cooking recipes are for the smoker, and blasting recipes are for the blast furnace. So let's go ahead and do smelting and blasting as is common for ores. So these methods don't have any overrides that make it a little bit easier to provide the input, so we have to actually create an ingredient ourselves. Just a minor inconvenience. So we could say from tag or from items. So let's go and do from items. And our ingredient is the ore. Next it wants the result, which is going to be the ingot. Then it wants the experience value, and I always forget what these are in vanilla. Now let's just take a look. Oh, so that is Alt F7 to look up usages. Very handy. Let's see, gold ore is 1 XP by the looks of it. Where's iron? Redstone ore is 0.7. Nether quartz ore is only 0.2, really. Okay. Let's go ahead and just say 0.7. Doesn't really matter. And finally, the standard cooking time for furnace recipes is 200 ticks. That would be 10 seconds. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this line with Control D. And I'm going to change this to a blasting recipe. And we're going to change the cooking time to 100. Which, again, is in line with what the vanilla values. And that should be everything we need, except we aren't actually building these recipes. My bad. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. And we're actually going to need to have one more step in this build in just a moment. Let me go ahead and add the criterion as well. And we'll check for the ore in this case. That sounds like the smart thing to do. Okay, so the problem here is that normally the recipe ID is going to be whatever the result is. So, yeah, in this case, it's getting the registry name for the item, the result item, and using that as the recipe ID. And we can't have duplicates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my own recipe ID here, and I don't have a helper function for that, do I? Okay, I'm going to go create a function here in just a second, just to kind of make this a little bit easier. So we're going to say silver ingot smelting. You can call it whatever you like. And down here, we're just going to replace smelting with blasting, so it has a different ID. Okay, let's go ahead and create that method. So this is going to return a resource location. And we'll call that the path. We're just going to return a new resource location with our mod ID as the namespace, and the path as the path. Basically, this is just a little minor convenience here. We can make the method static, doesn't matter. So that should be everything we need for those to work. Let's try running it. By the way, if there are any suggestions for what I should do for a tile entity or machine block or whatever, let me know. I want something that processes a custom recipe type, so we can cover that as well. So it could be something simple, like, say, pressing metal ingots into plates or whatever. Okay, so why are you doing this to me? It's saying that a loot table is missing, but it's a vanilla loot table. It should not be doing that. Ah, yes, I believe I know exactly what I did wrong here. There's one more method we need to override in mod block loot tables here. I completely forgot about it. There's this get known blocks method that is causing this crash. So what we want is to get just our blocks. So we should be able to get that from the registration class. So we've got our blocks deferred register here. And get entries, I guess, is the best option to start with here. I'm actually doing this a bit differently in the project I'm referencing, but this should work just fine. So let's go ahead and make a stream of that. So that's registry objects. So we need to map that to the block. So that'd be registry object get. And then we can collect it into a list or something. All at once isn't iterable, so list will work. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so that looks like it correctly worked, and I can see there's a bunch of new files here. So we've got the recipe advancement files here. So those were all generated with similar IDs to our recipes. Then we've got the loot tables for our blocks, which will fix the issue of them not dropping when being mined. Then we got the recipe for the silver block here. You can see the pattern lines up with what we made in the data generator. The key matches. And look at the silver ingot recipe. Just a vanilla shapeless recipe, which takes a single ingredient to block and outputs 9 ingots. Then we've got the blasting recipe with the 100 cook time, and smelting recipe, very similar, except different type, of course, and the double cooking time. And it does look like everything has worked correctly. So let's go ahead and run the game just to be sure. I've got to say, though, even though that get known blocks method tripped me up here, I'm very happy that it exists, because I've had so many bug reports of blocks just not dropping because of missing loot tables. It is so easy to forget, because everything requires so many different files now. Okay, so that drops, and that drops. And I believe we have JEI installed in this instance. No, we do not. Okay. You know, we've got time. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so to get JEI in our instance, we're going to need to make a couple of small edits to our build.gradle file here. So we want to find... I was expecting in a repositories block above the dependencies block down here, but I'm not seeing it. So I'll go ahead and add one. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and paste these in. You can get this information from the... I'm pretty sure it's on the README of the GitHub project for JEI. Or at least it's somewhere in their wiki. It tells you what repositories to look for. And let me go ahead and copy my code as well for the dependencies block. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of all this and paste this in. I'm going to have to make a couple of edits to that. So the way I do it is I often wrap things in an if statement to check if my gradle.properties file has like some mention of a mod version, but we're not doing that here. I'm just going to go ahead and type that in manually. So the version of JEI we want is 1.16.3:7.plus. So it's going to be version 7 or higher is what that 7.plus means. And we're building against Minecraft 1.16.3 versions, but again, it's all compatible in this case, so doesn't matter. Go ahead and hit that reformat. Looks like it reformatted a couple other lines when I hit Control-Alt-L there, but whatever. Okay, so we'll go ahead and re-import the project now. And we should be able to see under the Gradle sidebar here, it'll pop up under our dependencies. Okay, and there we go. We've got JEI listed under our dependencies now. So this time if we run, we should be able to look up the recipes to verify that they're there. Obviously, we could just, try to actually lay out the recipes and everything, spawn in a furnace and a blast furnace and test them that way, but who has the time for all that? If the recipe shows up in JEI, it's most likely working. Okay, now if we look up recipes for the ingot, we can see our blasting and smelting recipes here. The block is crafted like that. And that's pretty much all we need to look up. Okay, and I think I actually noticed one small issue here with our ore block. Pretty sure we need to add in a set requires tool call here. That way it can be mined without a pickaxe. So now it will require a harvest level 2 pickaxe. And I'm going to go ahead and break up this call here as well, just so it's a little bit more readable. There we go. Alright, so all of this code will be available on GitHub, same as before. Next time we'll start working on a block for some type of machine. It won't be finished for like at least 2 videos probably. And I will do my best to remember to reconfigure my display settings so that everything is larger. Alright, so thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next part.